We didn't collaborate much, and so we lost touch, but his kindness and bluntness always stayed with me. It was my first trip to Finland in Feb 2021, before the relocation in May with my dogs. I was returning the temporary laptop that I was given when I saw him reading a fat book on radar engineering. I didn't expect a long conversation with him, but it was such a pleasant surprise. He told me that my pet name Letty means pancake or omelette in Finnish. During this conversation, I asked him why is a software developer reading such a fat book on radar engineering and not some quick reads on its application. He said that he wants to be a true practitioner and see the foundation as the experts in the field do. He wants to understand the world of SAR, synthetic aperture radar, through the lens of those experts. Why is it so hard and what makes it so? And he wasn't keen on switching domains, so going deep made sense. He said, going deep takes time and patience. And I have all the time in the world right now. Come Feb 2024, Patrik was gone.
And fire burning on the lake. You said to me, I cannot make you happy like a wounded bird. You must find the strength to fly. Time can paint the treetops with colors of the rainbow, but you cannot find the end, no matter how you try.
I was still coming to terms with Fraser's loss and creating a fictional story in his memory. But at that time, in Feb 2024, I had no clue that one of my main characters, Jalo Monivilja, had become a memory as well. Jalo means noble and gracious, and I think Patrik means the same. The reason I'm talking about it today is obviously I came to know after a few months that he had passed away in Feb 2024. It's also weird because right about that time, I think on the 26th of Feb, published this episode. I was working on the episode, I think towards the last week of January, and throughout that period, there was such a deep sense of Patrik's presence. Thinking back now, when I think about this particular post and this effort called Travel Curators in Memory of Fraser, it seems like at least this particular character, Jalo Monivilja, has come to life after I learned that the person who inspired this character is the person I last saw in 2022. This is definitely a farewell for my friend, and I was unable to say goodbye and thank you to Patrik. But I am glad that our paths crossed 3 years ago. He was a guy who interviewed me. I think I had 8 rounds of interview with ISI at that point in time. The funny part was like all of the interviews with the people interviewing me, the interviewers, were fun. They have to do their job. They were serious as well. But I think the only person who was blunt during the interview was Patrik. And he was like, how can you know so much about Kubernetes and not know the fundamentals of something else that I'm asking you? I think we had a good conversation because it was funny because he was blunt and by nature I am actually quite blunt. Although I seem very social, but I'm very blunt if you let me be that way. But most of my self-conditioning, because I'm in the field of communication, is to be very straightforward but very polite and diplomatic in many ways. I totally resonated with Patrik's character because I'm like, oh wow, these Finnish people are just like me, or rather I am just like them, so I just fit in right there because they allowed me to be blunt, which I am by nature. I had a good conversation with him and he's like, so you know this stuff about Kubernetes and you talk about pods and stuff like that, but you couldn't tell me something that I thought was very easy. Like he had asked me a question about cloud deployment. I can't remember it at this point. We had a conversation about on-premise with respect to total cost of ownership. Obviously, I'm coming from the times when things were not cloud native. So we had words like cloud readiness, cloud enablement, and it was basically a package form. Even for that matter, when people say cloud native, in the initial years, it was still a packaged form. It wasn't like literally cloud native. So I could explain those things to him, but there was something about the deployment. I can't remember the exact question that he asked me, but it was so funny. And he started laughing when I responded. He's like, really? You could tell me about Kubernetes pods, but you can't tell me this basic thing about cloud deployment. And I was like, it was nice because I could tell him bluntly. Usually you don't tell that to an interviewer, but I was like, Patrik, since you're so blunt, I can probably tell you why. It's because I usually do not start from A to Z. I would start wherever my interest takes me. So at that point in time, I was trying to understand something about Kubernetes deployment because I was writing a Ghost blog series for a team that had done this massive infrastructure and cloud migration from AWS to GCP. So my entry point was not right from the foundation, but obviously, yes, I had learned a lot about cloud enablement, cloud readiness before cloud nativeness, because I was working for a number of years in the industry when things were not cloud native. So I knew those things, but there was something about the deployment that I didn't know. And I was like, the reason I know this much about Kubernetes is because of this blog series that I had written as a ghost blogger for a few people who had done this cloud to cloud migration. And it was a massive migration. And that's why I know the details. But it's not like I was so keen on cloud deployments that I would have gone in depth into that. He accepted the fact that, yes, I don't start at the foundational level because it's where your interest takes you. If you have a research question, you first figure out and you chase the question, then you go where the story leads you. So it's not necessary that you'll be like, hey, let me start from ABC and then get to wherever you want to get to. So I was like, that's the reason there's a lot of gap. I said there's always a jump because I would know certain things that seem advanced, but then I wouldn't know certain basic things. And he's like, okay, that's a fair argument. And I was like, I might not get through the next round. He's like, yeah, that's possible. He said, but I still like the fact that you knew these things about Kubernetes, which is something we are interested in. So he's like, there are gaps, definitely, but the fact that you know so much about it was quite interesting to me. So yeah, he's like, I don't know, I'll let you know later. I did go down a tangent finally because that's how it is talking to Patrik. It was like, I remember also the first time I met him, it was a Saturday and he was sitting, like I told you in this, I was just reading before, right? He was reading a fat book on radar engineering. And it was a Saturday and I came to return my temporary laptop and nobody was there. So I just like, hi, hello and everything. But it's like a nice formal talk about Wolverine, which is when he told me Wolverine means ahama in Finnish. And I knew what wolves mean because I like wolves. So I told him I know it means susi. He's like, yeah, they're elusive creatures, he said. So it's hard to find a Wolverine, but you can kind of find them in Finland if you want to, which is easier in Finland than in Canada because people tell me it's harder to find Wolverine in Canada. Anyways, let's not go down another tangent. Let's wrap this up. So I remember having that long conversation with him, and that's when he told me that my name would be. So he's like, it means omelette or pancake in Finnish. Those two conversations, one was the interview and the second was this conversation. And I was like, my God, this person is so blunt. And then I met a lot of people who are just like him. So I was like, oh, most Finnish people are like this, which is amazing. They're like, I can be myself. So I'm very, very grateful and that's why he's the first person I think of when I think of Finland. But I'm really grateful that our paths crossed 3 years ago. A bit sad that I was unable to say goodbye and thank you to him, but it's still been a pleasure working with him. And I think the last thing that I want to say, because there's so many micro stories that about Patrik that I remember. Sushi, I think, yeah. God, I hated it. Like every time we would go for lunch, and then I stopped going for lunch with him. I'm like, every time this guy orders, he loves to eat sushi, I think. So he's like, every time I would eat that, it's like, oh my God, I can't handle those chopsticks. I'll have my fork. I'm quite glad that I met him 3 years ago. I am glad that this character, Jalo Monivilja, is a character inspired by Patrik. And this character, although Patrik says that he said way back in 2021 that, Letty, I have all the time in the world right now. I hope Jalo Monivilja has all the time in the world to go deep. This character is not a software developer. Jalo Monivilja is a geologist. And Jalo, I told you, is already Patrik. It means nobility and graciousness. But Monivilja is I used to tease Patrik. Vilja means grain and Monivilja means multi-grain in Finnish. I was like, multi-grain bread? And he was like, don't say that. And I always, instead of saying Vilja, I wanted to say Monivilja. When I was creating this character, this is way before I knew Patrik had passed away. I was like, wow, when I tell him it's Monivilja, he's going to be like, Letty, you still went ahead and did that. Anyway, so Jalo is a geologist from Finland. And the school is based in Finland, but it is focused on the geology of the northern Canadian Cordillera. We'll get to that at some point, and probably you'll already know because of my love for the Yukon. But I love Finland, and Fraser, both my dogs, Fraser and Denver, we were all happy in Finland when we had this road trip, and I think there'll be another episode just about the road trip in September of 2022. So that's why the school is based in Finland. My geologist, Jalo Monivilja, specializes in eclogites. They are protoliths, and he specializes in the Taconian orogeny. This geologist from Finland has taken his first job in Newfoundland and Labrador, so that brings him to Canada, and then it becomes his home 9 years later. because he's working on this, right, he has this groundbreaking research on lawsonite eclogites. This geologist from Newfoundland and Labrador is asked to lead a decade-long research on the eclogites found in the Canadian Cordillera. So the first site is the Pinchy Fault area in central British Columbia. That's quite a prominent fault area. But generally it's a prominent fault area for the story. But if you're into eclogites, that's probably the first one. And this is where Jalo meets the other character in the story called Petonen, and she is his schoolmate. And that meeting was important to me, so I wanted them to meet at the most important fault area, relatively, like from a Canadian mindset. I am biased to the Yukon, so my favorite areas would always be like, oh, the eclogite was in the Yukon as well. We could just take those. But no, the Pinchy Fault area is the important one. And so he meets Petonen there, and that's when he learns about Professor Scamander's rescue effort to release his pet alchemy called Ouroboros from the Muggle brain. Over the course of other audiobooks or books, I don't know how I think it'll definitely be an audiobook, but it could also end up being a book or whatever other format it ends up being in. But this is just like, basically the story is the main thing, but the core is the geology of the area. So I do want that to come out. Anyway, so that was that. We will have a thematic focus on the geology of the Canadian Cordillera, including references to Newfoundland and Labrador, including references to Quebec, Finland, and a part of the Western Ghats in Goa, India, because that is connected to a certain landscape or geology of that area, and also because I am from Goa. When I get to that piece about the Western Ghats, I would also like to talk about the Deccan Trap, which is a basalt flow in that area in the west part of India, including Pune. So it's called the Deccan Trap. We want to talk about the history there as well. So I want to take that, not the history, the geology there as well. Before I move to the next section, which is about the stories. This is a non-commercial project, which is something that is very important. It's a work of fiction and a tribute to my friend Fraser, which is why I kind of use Professor Scamander's rescue effort, because it's a personal thing. It's just me talking to my friends. Like, a lot of people are inspired by the Potter series. I am too, but mainly Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them. And that's why this is Sartastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, which is my second podcast. But this first one is Arctic Owls. I want to continue to keep this as a non-commercial project because it's a dedication to Fraser and it will be a work of fiction. So the main caveat is that everything herein is imaginary and it has maybe some dangling facts. Like the characters, I do talk about David Bohm sometimes. So these are all real people, right? So there's David Bohm, there's William Long, there is Alan Watts, and there is Alan Wanderson. He's actually Alan W. Anderson, but I like to call him Wanderson because the wand is there. These are all real people. That's why I said there'll be some dangling facts, but mainly the whole story is imaginary. That is the first audiobook that I'm currently working on. It'll take a long time. And just a dedication note before we move to the next section is that this entire endeavor, including this website, Travel Curators one word, travelcurators.com. This website, my podcast, Arctic Owls, as well as Sartastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, and this fictional story about the Frazden School of Boundless Joy is all dedicated to my best friend Fraser, because Jalo Monivilja is a key character in my first audiobook, The Chosen Rock. The first audiobook of this series is dedicated to Patrik Vilja as well. This is like the context, talking about who inspired this character, and the next part is about certain snippets. I want it to be revelatory but not give away the whole story, so that's the reason I didn't want to share the script, but I do want to talk about certain aspects within the script, and that's why I wanted to have 5 key segments. Like, this is the first segment. The second segment is about the Rock Whisperer. It would also have the third segment within it, and then the fourth and the fifth will be other segments. I don't know whether I'll have all of this recorded in one episode or they might be 2 episodes, because anyway, season 2 now onward, everything from here on is related to this whole service project around Fraser and this fictional story. And I think with that, I will leave you and let's conclude the first part. This is the first part, which was all dedicated to Patrik. It was remembering Patrik Vilja, and the character inspired by Patrik is Jalo Monivilja, and the title of this segment is From Reality to Fiction.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Arctic Owls. The intro and outro music is by Cooper Moore, courtesy of Free Music Archive.